We are back. Welcome to Beyond Mount Rushmore, the history you didn't know you needed. My name is Jeff Hickox. I am a co-host of this fantastic show, and my fantastic friend across from me is the fantastic Stan Nawalonic.
You get the whole thing self-proclaimed presidential historian, because I like that and make it sound official.
I know. I thought I'd leave that to you.
You know, just stop with the niceties and let's tell him who I am. Hi, everybody.
This is how our conversations always start, by the way, with a little argument, and then we get on with the business.
Who are we talking about today?
I don't know. That's your job.
Yeah, I forgot. I'll tell you, because we teased, and this is going to be one of the most bizarre things we've ever discussed.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if I have to pick a president to discuss, I hate this guy worse than anybody else. Now we said in the last show, we were going to tell you about the first female president.
Correctamundo.
And that's not Dr. Jill Biden, and it's not Hillary Clinton. There was somebody way before those two troublemakers.
All right.
And she was the second wife of President Woodrow Wilson, who I cannot stand for so many reasons, and I'll go over them.
Yeah.
But we go and single out so many presidents. And I'll say this. It could be Richard Nixon in recent times. It could be Gerald Ford. It could be Donald Trump. It can be Joe Biden. Oh, these guys were the worst. How could they? We're going back to Nazi Germany. Woodrow Wilson, who ranks in the top half of presidents, when surveyed, what do you think of President Woodrow Wilson? He's, like I just said, he's in usually the top half of presidents, and people think so highly of him. He was a horrible, horrible human being.
Didn't he get us into World War I?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you did, and you are absolutely correct. And he did it by deceiving for political reasons. Now, let's everybody who may not know a thing about Woodrow Wilson, 28th president of the United States. He was president 2 terms from 1913 to 1921. He was born in 1856, Southern gentleman. I believe Virginia, but he lived most of his life in South Carolina.
Oh, really?
Then he became president of Princeton University in New Jersey, Ivy League school.
And I believe he didn't even learn how to read until he was almost 10, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Learning disability, or just you never picked up a book? Was he dyslexic?
Yep.
Okay. And he was governor of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Those were his credentials going to campaign for the presidency in 2012, getting elected in 2013. Here's the thing with him. And I say I don't like and I detest Woodrow Wilson. Had things gone as planned, he wouldn't have been president.
How's that?
Teddy Roosevelt, extremely popular president.
Yeah.
He finished out William McKinley's term. He was elected to his own 4-year term and made the mistake on telling the American people, I'm done with the presidency. I served the rest of McKinley's term. I had my 4 years. I am not going to run for re-election. And he pretty much had his hand-picked successor, William Howard Taft. Loved Howard Taft.
Yeah.
This is my boy. This is the guy that's going to continue our progressive dream and move the country forward.
Yeah.
It was quickly into Taft's term that he and Teddy Roosevelt did not see eye to eye. Roosevelt did not like some of the decisions Howard Taft was making.
Really?
And said, damn it, I'm going to run for president again.
Yeah.
And he started the Bull Moose Party.
Right. Yeah.
So Taft was the Republican Party's nominee, and Roosevelt said, I don't want him president. I'm going to run again. I'm entitled to another term. I'm going to run. And what did he do? He divided the party. And that left the door open for Woodrow Wilson, the only Democrat to serve as president during the Progressive era.
Really?
They were all Republicans during that time, and he was the only one during the Progressive era, and that was based on a divided ticket between Taft and Teddy Roosevelt.
Was he a known racist or a suspected
Okay.
racist?
Oh, I'm glad you brought this stuff up, because this is more stuff as to why I hate him.
Yeah.
I truly hate Woodrow Wilson.
Wow. That's
And I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to
almost
save...
like Thomas Edison.
Yes. You know what? Edison gets a lot of praise. He was a bum.
Yeah. I know.
A fraud. I think similarly to Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
He was how he gets rated as high as he does within presidents is beyond me. And I'm going to try to tackle a couple of these things, and then I'm going to get into the racist stuff, which is appalling.
Yeah, I know.
He was a real political liar. You brought it up in the beginning. He campaigned on keeping us out of World War I, neutral.
Right.
We were not going to bring our boys overseas. That is until he got reelected. His whole campaign for his reelection was keeping America out of the war. He very much wanted to be involved in World War I because he was a globalist.
Gotcha.
He looked beyond the United States, and he looked at himself as far superior. And I will go and set the world right.
So his ego.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And so when he got reelected, he immediately, we're going into World War I. You liar. He gave us citizens, everybody dreads April 15th.
Right.
He was the president that instituted the federal income tax, meaning you have to pay tax back to the federal government of your earnings.
The 16th Amendment was under him?
He Woodrow Wilson,
Yeah.
was the one that said, because before then it was all tariffs.
Right.
He was the one that introduced the federal income tax.
And it's something else.
That ass.
Yeah.
And then you brought this up as well. Not by 2025 standards, but by 1913 standards, Woodrow Wilson was a complete, unadulterated racist. Teddy Roosevelt, his predecessor, invited Booker T. Washington to dine with him at the White House. Unprecedented.
Famous American.
First African-American to go into the White House on invitation to meet with the president.
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson would not have any of that. He, behind the scenes, he would openly take pride in racist jokes. He would offend people of that era with his racial prejudice. He had the first screening of Birth of a Nation at the White House.
And that was a very racist movie.
Advocating the Ku Klux Klan, and he even put in writing, although he tried to backpedal from it, he has many notes praising the Ku Klux Klan. He was so blatantly racist that while the military was segregated all the way up until, I believe, Truman in the 1940s.
Wow.
But he actually increased segregation. He pushed segregation where branches of the military, branches of the federal government were not necessarily written as segregation. He made sure they were. And if there was limited segregation, he increased the segregation. He did not like black people, period. and how he has been left untouched in this era that we live in now is beyond me.
Right, because we're going back and rehashing all of our history, the founding fathers and past presidents, but for some reason...
Yeah, we're changing names of high schools that have George Washington's name or Thomas Jefferson's name.
Woodrow Wilson, untouched.
Untouched, and he was racist by his own time's standard.
Right, not ours, his time.
Correct. He was over the line then, and no guilt, no nothing. And this... Everybody, they leave him alone.
Incredible.
And I hate him. I hate him. He was a liar, a thief, an egomaniac, and a racist, period.
And he may not have been the president during his whole term.
Now we get to the rest of the story. Woodrow Wilson was a married man when he came into the White House. His first wife her name was Ellen, and her death in 2014, and we've talked about this before, she died in 2014, well into his first term. I mean, she was first lady in the White House, his first term, year and a half. She died from Bright's disease.
Oh.
So the same thing that got Chester
Arthur, yeah.
She had a kidney ailment, and she died.
Wow.
Wilson was distraught, inconsolable. His bride has died.
Yeah.
This is while a world war is going on, world events are changing, and
that's a lot of stress.
He is sobbing and inconsolable.
Yeah.
But it gets odd, and why I don't trust or like Woodrow Wilson. He was introduced to his future second wife, a woman who had been married once before herself.
Okay.
Her name, Edith Galt.
Edith.
Galt. Edith Galt.
I like Ellen better than Edith.
Me too.
No offense to all the Ediths out there.
But there's not many.
Not anymore, no.
But Wilson is introduced to his second wife, Edith, in March of 1915. They marry a little more than a month later. How do you do?
Wow.
Month later, they're married. And again, I can't stand him. His eye is off the ball. He's daydreaming.
Right. We've got World War I going on.
Staring us right in the face.
Yeah. And he's focused on his new heartthrob.
Edith.
Yeah, Edith.
Love letters. Daydreaming. Not tending to work. Just going on. And people, his own administration's like, hey, we need this stuff done. Family notes with the family members. He's in love. He just spends his day writing love letters and reading letters to this Edith who he meets and quickly marries.
Yeah.
World War I, we're now involved. We win what was called the War to End All Wars. Why was it called the War to End All Wars? Well, Woodrow Wilson wanted to make sure. Woodrow Wilson wanted to make sure it was the War to End All Wars, and he was going to take care of it.
So, in other words, it was an ego thing. Yet again, another ego thing with him. He wanted to boast that it was the war to end all wars, and I'm going to end it.
He believed, and I'm not saying he's totally wrong, he was just too absorbed in the Allies getting together to create a group of allies to oversee the world. That if something happens to you, France, or something happens to you, England, or something happens, we will protect you because we are the League of Nations.
Sounds like a superhero team.
Yeah. Now, this all came down at the Treaty of Versailles.
Right.
Where they're all sitting talking about what are they going to do with Germany and how are they going to go and punish them and what are they going to take away from them and how are we going to go and divide up the world into puzzles and who takes care of what, and we're going to go and do this. And so they get the Treaty of Versailles all taken care of, and the peace treaty to have peace in our time.
Right.
And then Woodrow Wilson says, now we got to go and start the League of Nations, which, incidentally, a much watered-down version became what we have now with the United Nations.
Right.
But this was totally different. He was going to head it up.
This was a little, yeah. They were. I mean, the League of Nations, because of that time too, they were a little bit more powerful, and the United Nations much less involved.
Correct. Now, he knew, as all the other leaders that were trying to get this League of Nations started, each country had to go and get approval from their people, their country, that this is what they want to do, so we can all sign the big agreement.
Right.
And just like the way the Constitution is written today, Wilson can have this bright idea of the League of Nations, but it needs congressional approval. You've got to have the Congress, the House and the Senate, agree to this to have any power whatsoever. So Wilson, like any other president does, Trump does it all the time. I don't know if Biden did, but he did. When you have an idea, when you have a plan that you want to push through, President Obama did it with Obamacare. You go to every city imaginable, trying to sway the population to tell your congressman you want this.
Right.
And then by the time the Congress convenes and the Senate convenes and the House, they're voting for whatever it is that the president has been going all over the country campaigning about.
Right. Like the big, beautiful bill that's going on right now.
Precisely.
Gotcha.
So Wilson begins to go around the nation campaigning on this League of Nations.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, while we're at it, do you want to know what Wilson sounded like?
Actually, I would.
Take a listen to this clown ass.
We stand in the presence of an awakened nation. Plainly, it is a new age. There are two great things to do. One is to set up the rule of justice and right in such matters as the tariff, the regulation of trusts, and the prevention of monopoly. The business of government is to separate special and particular interests from the general interests of wide communities. The initial task this year is to get our government in such shape that we can use it for our own purpose, not against anybody in particular, but for everybody in general.
What an ass.
Pompous.
So he's going around campaigning for this League of Nations because he's got his own worries. He's got to get, as I said, Congress to approve this.
Right.
All the other countries are doing what they have to do so that they can reconvene and ta-da, we got League of Nations. This is wearing him out. He's not a healthy man. There are good reports that Woodrow Wilson, from the time before he took office in his first term to the time that he's going around the country with the League of Nations, there's good evidence that he had a series of mini strokes.
Oh.
What are they, TAIs? Is that what they're called?
No.
Mini strokes.
I'll go with mini strokes.
Where, it might affect his motion. It might affect the use of one of his arms. Just a tingly feeling that he has.
It comes back.
And it happens to a lot of people, and it happened to him, but they say at least, 3-4 times he's had these mini strokes. He's not in the best of health. And this going around the country is wearing him the F out.
Right.
In September of 1919, 39 speeches in 3 weeks.
Wow.
To go and get support for the
39 in 3 weeks.
Yes. On
It's almost 2 a day.
Yeah. Oh, and they'd
all
go
over the country.
Yeah, and he'd come down off the podium and collapse. They'd towel him down, and off he'd go to the next one.
Wow.
And he's not healthy.
Right.
September 25th, Pueblo, Colorado. he collapses again. This one's a bad one. They don't know how bad, but he collapses.
Full-on stroke.
Well,
they don't know yet.
Nobody knows nothing about anything. That's the whole problem with this Wilson character and what goes on. President Wilson collapsed in Pueblo, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Rest of the tour canceled. President going back to Washington, D.C. to rest. Sure. On October 2nd. So he collapses September 25th.
Yeah.
October 2nd, Woodrow Wilson has what can only be called a massive stroke, a massive one.
At the White House? Was he
at the White House? Yes, he had come back to recuperate. How massive? It paralyzed his left side, and with only partial vision in his right eye, he is confined to bed for weeks and sequestered from everyone. And I mean everyone, except Edith,
his wife,
and his doctor. Now, I have this clip. The guy's called the History Guy.
Okay.
And he likes finding out these little facts. And I heard his clip. How does the President of the United States have a stroke and nobody knows about it? And his wife was the one to make sure. See, if something happens and you have the president becomes incapacitated, the vice president has to
he
be in charge.
The duties
he
of
assumes
the
duties. Wilson has a stroke at the White House, goes to the hospital. The phone call comes in that this is really bad. Here is the History Guy explaining this one.
Okay.
From the moment of his stroke, Edith Wilson went down a separate hall to ensure that it be kept secret. It was a level of secrecy that would be considered shocking today. So secret that the website Eyewitness to History noted that for 17 months, the president lay in his bed near death, barely able to write his own name.
Jeez.
And the world knew none of it. The journal Neuroscience noted that the severity of his stroke was kept from Wilson himself, his cabinet, Congress, and the American people.
Nobody knew about it, and it was she that made sure. This is a blatant breaking of the Constitution, constitutional law, constitutional rules. If it went on today in 2025, heads would roll.
All hell would break loose.
Yep. And she kept it from everyone. The vice president didn't know. Congress didn't know.
How on earth could, how on earth?
So when the president, this is how sick it was. I mean, and I'm going to exaggerate a little bit so you can get an image in your mind.
Okay.
But I'm not that far off. Members of Congress wanted to see President Wilson. How do we know he's not sicker than he is?
Right.
How do we know he's not dead?
Right.
How do we know? How do we know?
Proof of life.
Well, Edith will arrange a visit if you'd like. And what would pretty close, I'm exaggerating, but it's pretty literally what happened.
Yeah.
Is they would bring the congressperson up to his private quarters, into his room, and the door would open, and Wilson would be by the window with like mosquito netting around him, so that you could basically just see his silhouette.
Yeah.
And he had one good hand, but it was almost like a marionette waving at him. Oh, there you can see, there's the president. He's at his desk. He's hard at work.
Boy, puppet master indeed.
Yeah, and then, you go back, okay, I saw the president. Wow. He's at work. Edith Wilson, for 17 months, handled all of his paperwork, guided his hand to sign things, took all of his phone calls, took all of his correspondence, determined who could visit him, who could not visit him, and made decisions that the vice president and Congress should have made. The country had no leader, and she was running the show.
That is incredible. There's no way that could you could get away with that today.
None. This is scandal of the highest degree.
Yeah. Wow.
And so Edith controlled everyone who saw him, handled all of, as I said, all of his mail and correspondence. No one knew. The vice president, and here's a name, he should have been president.
Yeah.
But you'll never know who he was, and I'm going to say his name, but you won't know who he is. Vice President Thomas Marshall. The American people had no idea. They thought he had exhaustion, needed to rest.
How do we know that the decisions were made were even his? She could have been just
Correct.
doing it herself.
Correct. He had, as I told you, it affected Wilson's, after Woodrow Wilson died.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to get into that in a second too.
Yeah.
But after Woodrow Wilson died, experts, scholars, and medical people looked at his records. How incapacitated was he? They said, after analyzing his medical records, that Wilson's illness affected his personality in various ways, making him prone to disorders of emotion, impaired impulse and control issues, and defective judgment.
There you go.
Meaning he couldn't make
Yeah.
decisions for the country. She was making decisions for the country.
He couldn't even make him for himself, yet alone our country.
Correct. He leaves office.
Yeah.
He goes back home, and to go and continue the ruse, because he lived briefly after he left the White House. Edith got a hold of his old law partner.
Mm-hmm.
Let's open up the law offices again to leave the impression that Woodrow Wilson is now back in private life, and he's reestablishing his law practice with his old partner. It was ceremonial. He came there the first day
Yeah.
and never came back. And there is some footage of him after he left the presidency at a window so people could see him at the window.
Really?
With a locked hand because he couldn't move it. And Edith and another people basically keeping him propped up so he could wave with his one good hand to the people.
Wow. I'm going to try to find that video if I can.
Please
Put it
do.
on the Facebook page. Edith, what happened to her?
Well, Wilson passes away. He died on, let me get the exact, he died February 1924 at the age of 67.
Okay. Young.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
Edith lived all the way until December 28th, 1961.
Really?
She was a beloved woman to people like Eleanor Roosevelt, a strong woman.
Yeah.
She, as a matter of fact, was at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy. And
Wow.
she passed away December 28th, 1961, at the age of 89. Congestive heart failure for her. And she is buried next to her husband at the Washington National Cathedral.
That is incredible. What an incredible story.
An unbelievable
I cannot
story.
believe that this racist guy was even the president to begin with,
Yeah.
and then his wife finishes the term and nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Wow. Good job. What are we going to do next episode, Mr. Stan?
Well, we're going to talk about the Lincoln assassination.
Oh, because that's never been talked about before.
Oh. I'm not talking about Abraham Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth.
Huh?
I'm talking about another tragedy that night at Ford's Theater.
Really?
That was far. Obviously, when a president passes away, this is a traumatic thing.
Yeah.
But on a personal level, something far more tragic. Let me just put it to you this way for our next episode.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Abraham Lincoln and his wife in the box at Ford's Theater. They had two guests
Okay, well, I guess we'll get into
Do you
that.
think they went by unscathed?
Apparently not, because that's what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks.
Oh, do I have to hit more music?
If you don't mind.
All right.
There you go. This has been Beyond Mount Rushmore. I am Jeff Hickox, and my co-host and self-proclaimed presidential historian, Stan Nawalonic.
All right, so we'll see you in about another 2 weeks. And remember, we've got past podcasts that you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out our Facebook page, too, Beyond Mount Rushmore. If you have a question for us or a comment, we'd love to hear you.
All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks.